manned based on tank levels. Table salt mixed with soft water is electrolyzed. The Myox produces 0.4% sodium hypochlorite, which is very safe to handle. As an operator, the operational safety factor is very important to me. The high risks and hazards of working with chlorine gas have really been eliminated with the on-site generators. Not to mention the city mitigating that risk to the community.
Hi, my name is Mike Coleman. I work for the City of Richland. I'm the wastewater treatment plant mechanic. Everything that goes down your drain ends up at the wastewater treatment plant. My main goal is to try to keep the plant running as effectively and efficiently as possible. Before we had the Myox, we had 1-ton chlorine gas containers. Every 2 years, you'd have to tear equipment down to rebuild it because of how caustic the gas was. The same building we had the ton containers in, that's where we've put the new on-site generators. They take up a smaller footprint. They're very user-friendly. They save us a lot of time. We have two 5,100-gallon bulk storage tanks that we fill every day. We inject that in our effluent structure, and we try to achieve and maintain a 0.35%. We really don't have any odor control now. It's pretty well balanced. It smells like you're playing in a pool.
Today we're finding a more stable residual throughout the whole system that's not requiring as much effort to maintain. We have programs designed so that we can move that water and maintain that fresh chlorine residual. The on-site generation has helped us be able to dial that feed rate in. Since we've gone to on-site generation, we're a much safer organization, and we feel a much higher comfort level in what we're providing to our citizens, the safety and the impact on our environment.
I have a dream today. Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
The United Nations finds itself confronted today with the gravest crisis in its existence.
It is evident now that the world entirely is at war. Yesterday, December 7th,
now I know my ABCs. Won't you come on home with me?
It was 1941, and the small farming community of Richland was basking in modest prosperity. A new grade school had been built and other community infrastructure improvements were underway. The town of 240 people was proud of the sacrifices it had made to survive the years of the Great Depression and was looking ahead to its continued success. But the greatest sacrifice was yet to come. World War II, the war to end all wars. Like all communities, Richland was committed to the war effort. Its young men registered for the draft. The community purchased saving stamps and war bonds. December 16, 1942, a small plane circled the skies above Richland. Its passengers, AES Hall, to accommodate 6,500 employees, support personnel, and family members.
DuPont contacted Alvin Pearson, a noted Spokane architect, and he literally had 48 hours to make up his mind to provide a community of 4,000 homes. And so he came up with this unique design, giving them alphabet designation, A homes, B homes, so forth, all the way down the line. DuPont wanted to kind of offer respite. It was a very strict military atmosphere, and so they wanted a community that was totally, opposite.
Now, in the core of Richland, the part that Pearson was responsible for designing, it reflects, what urban designers call communitarian values. And he set up, small little neighborhoods, where people could interact. You didn't have to drive a car or even have a car to interact with your neighbors and meet them at schools or in the neighborhood shopping areas. They had the large communal backyards, and so in each section of town he would put small commercial centers, usually a supermarket and a number of stores, like barbershops, beauty shops, drugstores, and the like, were also clustered, in these neighborhoods.
Homes went up quickly as DuPont constantly added to its original estimate. Ultimately, the population count would be revised to 16,000 residents, quickly followed to satisfy the expanding population needs.
Well, there were about 13 designs in World War II. There were about 3,700 homes were built. And out of the 13 designs, a couple were dormitories, the J and K, which were to provide accommodations for, single personnel. You had the 8, ABC homes, as I like to call them, 8 different designs, and then you had the 3 prefabs, the 1, 2, and 3 bedroom designs.
There were 3 classes that were constructed in that Second World War period, and they were differentiated by size and therefore by cost. And the A's and B's are in the class 1, and the F's and H's are in class 2, and the D's and E's and G's and L's are in the 3rd class.
The so-called management, the junior executive, the management class, got a lot of the homes east of GW Way, between GW Way, which was the north-south arterial, which it still is today, and the Columbia River. And although Pearson's original, once again, he had to compromise. Another thing he had to compromise on. He wanted a kind of a democratic mixture. He came from these planner architect school that, democracy through housing.
I think Pearson, really did succeed overall in establishing a community which had a very low social gradient. People who were at the top of the scale, the most upper echelon managed.
Pleased about that because he thought that was kind of a neat little house, and pleased about that because he thought that was kind of a neat little house, and really it was. I don't think she minded the prefab once we got in. I think her first impression of those flat roofs is what struck her and made her, refer to it as a cracker box. She couldn't believe she was going to live in a cracker box.
Many more of the employees had families than was originally anticipated. As waiting lists for homes grew, single-room apartments were canceled and made room for 1,800 prefabricated homes, as overworked employees were eager for any available dwelling they could call home.
You kind of took what you could get. And then, as I remember, there was a list there where you could try to upgrade yourself if you wanted to get on that list.
We had to wait to get a house. That was very limited. First of all, we had to wait for him to get his Q clearance. And then we had to wait for the house. So it was a number of months before we could get a house and move to Richland.
I know that every Friday night we'd go down to that bulletin board that was outside of a building just off Jadwin there to see what houses were available to move into, and we never did move.
My dad came home from work at the Remington Arms when, and we were living in Boulder, Colorado. And he said, DuPont wants me to go out to Washington. My mom says, what for? Right away. And he said, well, they have a job going on out there. And Mom says, I'm not going. Dad says, well, I'm going to go. And they had given him tires and gas stamps to get out here because he wanted to drive his own car. And
waiting for anything became just a matter of life.
we only had a few stores here on George Washington Way, as you know. And so you stood in line to buy beverages, you stood in line to get your mail, you stood in line for everything.
We accepted things in those days that seems to be better than folks do now. You know, and it was just a way of life. And the hell, I'd been in the service and you spend all your time in the line in there, you know. And most time you don't even want to be in it. So if you wanted to be in it, that was an improvement right there.
Security had another beneficial social effect, you know? And you know, if a worker was involved in a serious legal infraction, there was a risk that that worker would lose his clearance. And if you lost your clearance, you had, I think it was 5 or 7 working days, to vacate your government-owned home. And it also applied to members of your family. If they got in trouble with the law, Mom or dad who held the security clearance, held the job, was also at risk for termination. So there was incentive on a number of generational fronts to behave yourself.
The world will note that the first atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, a military base. We won the race of discovery against the Germans.
The government realized, especially with the post-World War II boom, baby boomers. You needed larger kitchens. I know with our Q house, it's a much larger kitchen than the World War II homes.
And you didn't pay for electricity, you didn't pay for water. Everything was furnished in the rent, and even the coal.
Yeah, everything was provided, and it was very inexpensive. Even for that time period. Obviously, everything was subsidized.
It wasn't your house; it belonged to the government, or at HEW, and so that was the rules. You couldn't paint on your own. You were not allowed to. You had to call them to if you wanted a paint job. One of the things that a lot of the people did is that they had cement bathtubs, and they were cement bathtubs. They were very rough and gray and unappetizing looking, so a lot of the people kind of accidentally dropped things in them to crack them so they could get a new bathtub.
When you really think about it, the houses were better than anything we had when we came here. They were brand new, they were all electric, they were clean.
The last era of homes was called the Korean War era, and there was the C&K designs, about 140, 150 of those homes constructed, and also you had the stripped apartments along GW Way, where some of them were built. These are your last two homes, and even some of the post-World War II, the interwar homes.
Richland was a government town, and town life was far from convenient. It was a timid cartoon character with a funny name that brought Richland's residents needed humor to the otherwise demoralizing living conditions. Dupus Boomer, created by Dick Donnell, a DuPont employee who had no previous cartooning experience, took his name from the Dupe from DuPont, the U.S. from United States, and Boomer, a nickname for workers who followed boomtown construction. Donnell's character, which appeared in the Richland Villager newspaper from 1945 until it ceased publication in 1950, helped many Richland residents see the humor in the termination winds and other pitfalls of early Richland life.
I remember I had a kitty, I had a cat that I named it Atomic because we got him about the time that they announced the bomb. That's what had been going on. And this little black cat disappeared. And shortly after the cat disappeared, there was a Dupus Boomer cartoon in the Villager, the newspaper, I think that's what it was. And it was showing, of course, the winds, which they almost all referred to a lot of the winds. And up in the corner of this cartoon was this little black cat blowing. And we always thought, well, that's what happened to my cat, because he just plain blew away.
I'm Dave Donnell. I'm Dick Donnell's grandson. Grandfather had a very dry sense of humor. That had lived here during that time. They were a part of it, and they could sort of relate to the different things that he drew.
Most of the humor people found in their situations seemed to revolve around their identical houses, stacked neatly side by side on identical streets.
It was, when we first came here, everything looked the same. All the houses, there was not a landmark, so to speak. I was a little nervous about leaving the house, hoping I could find my way back. And what was interesting is because no one ever locked their doors. And one night, we were in bed, and we heard someone at the door, opened it up, came in, and my husband got up to see, and the man was confused, thought it was his house. he asked him what he was doing there, and he said, well, this is my home. And Ray says, no, it's not. He was so embarrassed and confused. I think he might have had a drink or two. And he just mumbled and left. Hopefully he found his home.
My father-in-law was visiting me, and he went downtown for something, and when he come back, he just walked into the wrong prefab. And as I remember, he had a pie, and he walked in there and he said, what do you want me to do with that? And that old gal, but you know, she probably had seen him over at our place, so she sent him north.
It was a coal-burning furnace, a giant furnace down in the basement. And one day...
United States history.
There was a policy regulating how the disposal would be put into effect. The current occupant of a home had the, what's it called, the right of first refusal. If that family, you know, did not want that house, then there was procedure for, others who worked in Hanford, to, put a bid on that place. But at that time, there was a lot of fears, that if the mission of Hanford, would end, and that, always was a background fear for the workers. That they would be stuck with housing that they couldn't sell. And in fact, GE made offers, that if you are willing to pay a little more money, and buy a house, and the mission of Hanford ends or is attenuated significantly, we'll buy it back from you. But if you're willing to take the risk, you can buy it at a lower price. But then if the mission ends, of course, then you're out of luck, and if you can't sell it.
We were about the last area to go up for sale of the houses, and we knew when this was going to happen, and that we had Babs. So at 7 o'clock, we opened the door, and people streamed in and through the house and around the backyard, and this young fellow, within 5 minutes, came up to us and said, I'll take it.
Once the homes found their way into private hands, the regimented similarity that made the city unique suddenly became the reason to give the homes an overnight facelift.
People put their personalities into these homes in several different ways, whether they do major cosmetic changes to the exterior part of the house, or if they just dress up trim or minor features along the house.
We moved up from the prefab into a 3-bedroom ranch house. Right away, of course, we thought about remodeling, redoing the kitchen and doing something with the little shed in the back.
A lot of the A houses and B houses, alphabet houses, didn't have a fully excavated basement. And we didn't. We had a half basement. So that is one of the renovations we made soon. And we were fortunate enough to have sand in our particular area, but the houses down on the south end had big rocks.
One of the major things that I see that people do is they convert the A house into a single residence, where they basically take out the wall that separates the two and make it a single family thing. The nice thing about the F house is for one thing, it's a very sound house, and it's a very functional house and utilitarian house. There's not a whole lot of, well, I guess I could say that for a lot of the government houses. There's various houses, and even though we've seen them several times, it's still interesting to see the little details that people put into their houses. It just makes them more charming, makes them more livable, more appealing to the community.
I came from the East Coast, and I'm very comfortable and familiar with the traditional style of housing, the Federalist and the neo-colonial revivals that's very common back there. And the L House fits into that style of architecture. So it just appealed to me, and with 4 bedrooms and a basement and a dining room, it had enough space for our family, and needs, and my wife's looms, and had a nice yard, distinctive architecture. It was something that we rented, and when one came up on the market, we made our bid on it. The layout is very comfortable. The living quarters down here on the first floor are separated from the utilities down in the basement and from the living quarters upstairs. That's a nice feature. It has simplicity in design. You're not forever running around, hosing down the gingerbread that you find on some houses. The upkeep on it is relatively simple. Just has a lot of good design features and mechanical features that appeal to me as a homeowner. Yeah, Pearson was very intent on making sure that work.
Because the women couldn't stand clay, because the women couldn't stand, we'll say, the isolation, the dust, just nothing to do, no culture, nothing like that. We stayed because he had a good job. He could get his education. I could work. And we did make friends here. And we liked it. After the 2 years, as I always told people, when I would meet new people and they'd say, oh, I don't know if I can stand it, I said, give it 2 years. You're going to find it's a great place to bring up kids. And it was a great place to bring up kids.
We learned to love it here. When I first came here, it's the ugliest place I have ever been. Because my family, I'd come home from college, and there would be tumbleweeds blowing down the street, sand, And when Ray said he was coming back here, I just said, oh, no, I don't want to go back there. And he says, well, that's where my job will be. But over the years, I've loved it here. I wouldn't care to live anyplace else.
Yeah, sure, it's a government town. The government doesn't own it anymore. The owners, the houses own it, and it's wonderful. I would never consider moving anywhere else.
A, B, C, D, E, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W.
you. Thank you. you.